Welcome back to Our True Identity. We are the authors of In the Fullness of Time, and it's truly an honor for us to be with you again, continuing our weekly series. We're journeying together year by year through history and faith, really digging into who you are in Christ.
That's right. And this is week 13 of that journey. We find ourselves now arriving in, well, a really pivotal year, 84. If you're thinking in Roman terms, that's the 757th year since the founding of the city.
And for anyone living in the empire then, 84 must have felt like a year of intense contradiction. On one hand, you've got the sheer scale, the marble grandeur of Augustus's Rome. It's unprecedented.
Absolutely. But set right against that is this unavoidable, devastating reality of human mortality. It hits right at the heart of power.
And that contradiction, that tension between the permanence we try to build, whether it's empires or just our own lives, and the undeniable fragility of it all. That's really the core of what we want to explore this week.
Exactly. Our purpose here, as always in this series, is to trace God's providence. We want to show you how he was actively, even in subtle ways, preparing the world for Christ.
Because even when things look chaotic, right, with all the power struggles, the human striving for control that we see so clearly in 84, God's plan is still unfolding perfectly.
And 84 illustrates this just so powerfully. You see the world searching almost desperately for meaning, for order, for some kind of permanence in human systems and political structures.
Only to find again and again that those deep longings, they're only truly met in Christ.
Precisely. So we'll be looking at really three distinct movements happening simultaneously this year. Gives you a real sense of the contrast.
Okay, so first?
First, there's Rome. A staggering succession crisis hits Augustus. I mean, it rocks the foundations, forcing him to choose an heir he fundamentally did not want.
Wow, okay. And second?
Second, we shift focus to Judea. The Herodian dynasty, Herod the Great's legacy, is just continuing to fracture. It's marked by cruelty, by political pressure from Rome. It's unstable.
Right. And the third movement?
And third, almost invisibly, in profound obscurity, far away in Galilee, the true heir of all nations is growing up. A boy, 8 years old, Jesus, quietly growing in wisdom and strength.
So while one world is trembling over who inherits Caesar's power.
Yeah, who gets the adopted sonship? The eternal king, the true son, is advancing completely unnoticed. His authority needs no human decree. It's a stunning contrast.
It really is. Okay, let's start in Rome then. This succession crisis sounds like a major shockwave.
Oh, it was. And to really feel the impact of 84, you have to appreciate just how high Augustus had climbed. I mean, by this point, the Roman Empire is operating at peak perceived efficiency.
It's the image, isn't it? Rome draped in marble. We hear that phrase, but it was becoming literally true. Its reach was just enormous.
Enormous. Think about it. From the cloudy shores of Britannia all the way down to the deserts bordering Arabia. It's vast.
And it wasn't just about military might, though that was there. It was a kind of political genius holding it together.
That's a great way to put it. You have this whole sprawling territory bound together by a sophisticated system of Roman law, a unified coinage that made trade possible across continents.
And the roads, those famous Roman roads connecting everything.
Exactly. Military-grade roads tying the whole thing together. And Augustus himself, he'd spent decades carefully crafting this image, this identity for himself that went way beyond just being a ruler.
He was Pater Patria, right? Father of the fatherland?
Precisely. That title was official. He was positioned as the guarantor of security, the one who restored ancient Roman piety, the man who finally brought peace after, what, a century of brutal civil wars.
And the poets, like Horace, they weren't just, sucking up. They seemed to genuinely believe he'd ushered in a golden age. Stability had returned.
There was a real sense of relief and belief in that. And if you visited Rome itself, everything was designed to shout permanence. Think about the Areopagus, the altar of peace.
Which was pretty recently completed around this time.
Yes, exactly. And it wasn't just a pretty shrine. It was just an incredibly sophisticated piece of, well, political theology in stone. The carvings, the friezes. They celebrate Augustus's family, the fertility of the land under his rule, the stability of the Julian line itself.
So every arch, every statue, every public building was reinforcing this message. Rome is eternal. Augustus's order is forever.
Yeah, that was the goal. But yeah, it's a huge but. Amidst all that marble, all that control, Augustus faced the one power he simply couldn't command.
Mortality.
Mortality.
Yeah.
For all his legions, all his titles, the inescapable question haunted him. Who carries this on? Who inherits this massive, yet ultimately fragile legacy.
He had tried to answer it, hadn't he? He'd planned for this.
Oh, absolutely. He'd poured everything into his succession plan. His hopes, Rome's future, it was all invested in his two grandsons, Lucius and Gaius Caesar.
His daughter Julia's sons, with Agrippa, his right-hand man.
Correct. And Augustus didn't just favor them. He legally adopted them, raised them as his own sons. He paraded them publicly. These boys were the future of Rome, the living embodiment of those prophecies on the Arapacius.
It sounds like the perfect plan, built on blood and law.
On paper, yes. But reality, as we know, has a way of disrupting even the best-laid imperial plans. Human foundations, no matter how grand they look, often rest on something incredibly fragile, just a pulse, a breath.
And the first blow had already fallen a couple of years earlier, in 82.
Right, Lucius Caesar. He was traveling, heading to take up a military command in Spain, I believe, and he just died, suddenly, in Massilia, modern Marseille.
That must have been a huge shock, a personal tragedy for Augustus, of course, but also a crack in that image of imperial continuity.
A massive crack. Grief for Augustus, yes, but also a serious disruption to the narrative. Still, there was Gaius.
Gaius was the remaining hope. Younger, maybe more charismatic. He was definitely active in state affairs.
Very active. In 84, he's out in the east. Important mission. Stabilizing treaties, dealing with the always tricky situation in Armenia, that crucial border zone between Rome and its great rival, Parthia.
High-stakes diplomacy.
Extremely high stakes. And it's out there during these negotiations that the second fatal blow lands.
What happened?
Details are a bit murky, but it seems Gaius suffered a serious wound, possibly during skirmishes related to the negotiations. And in the ancient world,
Infection.
infection was often deadlier than the wound itself. Gaius fell ill, and he died in Lycia, on the coast of what's now Turkey. He was barely 23 years old.
23. The final designated heir. Gone.
Gone. Just imagine the weight of that news traveling back to Rome. It would have taken weeks for the messengers carrying those black tidings, traveling along those supposedly eternal Roman roads.
And when the news finally hit the capital?
The shock must have been profound. It rippled across the entire Western world. The dynasty, Augustus's carefully constructed line, was effectively extinct.
Wow, so what did that mean on the ground? Panic.
Uncertainty was absolutely rampant. You had senators who'd been carefully positioning themselves for Gaius's future reign suddenly thrown into chaos. Aristocratic families plunged into mourning, and out in the provinces, people who'd gotten used to this idea of Roman stability, they started questioning. Is this really secure?
Augustus, the man who seemed to command destiny, was utterly powerless against death.
Completely powerless. And this moment, this specific historical event, it really throws a spotlight on something timeless about our own identity, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, we look at Augustus, this giant of history. Building an empire meant to last forever. Yet the entire structure, all that power, rested on the fragile lives of two young men.
It's a stark reminder.
It really is. And we often do something similar, maybe on a smaller scale, in our own lives. We build our careers, our financial plans, our reputations, our own little personal dynasties, hoping they'll be permanent.
We place our trust in the systems we think we can control.
Exactly. Yeah. But mortality, unexpected change, things we just can't foresee, they're the rivals we can never truly defeat. The cracking of that imperial identity in 84 forces us to ask, where is our ultimate trust placed? Because any plan built only on human strength, on human life, it's eventually going to fail. It leaves us searching for something, anything, truly unshakable.
Which leads directly to the next part of the story in Rome. With Gaius gone, the succession plan wasn't just cracked, it was shattered.
Utterly shattered. Augustus is old now, in the twilight of his reign, and he's staring into this terrifying vacuum of power. He has to secure Rome's future, even if it means going against every personal preference he ever had.
And that's where Tiberius comes in.
That's where Tiberius steps into the void. He was, in many ways, the logical choice, but maybe the most reluctant one.
Augustus' stepson, right? Livia's son from her previous marriage.
Correct. And Tiberius wasn't some unknown quantity. He was a proven general, immensely successful. His campaigns, particularly along the Danube and in Germany, had secured vital frontiers for Rome. He was competent.
But there's always a but with Tiberius, it seems.
There is. His competence was matched by this notoriously brooding, difficult temperament. He was known for being aloof, maybe even resentful of the whole imperial court scene, certainly seemed weary of the politics surrounding Augustus and his mother, Livia.
Didn't he actually leave Rome for a while?
He did. Years earlier, feeling sidelined because Augustus was so clearly promoting Gaius and Lucius Tiberius, retreated into this kind of self-imposed exile on the island of Rhodes. He just checked out.
So he's the veteran soldier, proven in battle, but deeply unpopular in the capital, lacked that golden touch the grandsons had.
Exactly. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't the people's darling. So Augustus's choice now in 84, it wasn't driven by affection or any kind of personal warmth. It was pure necessity. Duty.
There just wasn't anyone else qualified.
No other legitimate, experienced alternative who could realistically manage the legions, manage the vast machinery of the state. It had to be Tiberius.
So Augustus makes the move.
He does. He performs the necessary legal steps. In 84, he formally adopts Tiberius as his son and heir. It's a solemn ceremony.
Using that Roman legal process, adrogatio.
Precisely. Adrogatio. It's essentially a legal fiction designed to prioritize political need over biological reality. Augustus is using Roman law to create the family link he needs.
And how is this presented publicly? Not exactly a joyous occasion, I imagine.
No, not at all. The whole thing was framed with utmost gravity. This wasn't the celebration. It was portrayed as the dutiful recall of a public servant, a soldier summoned back by fate, by necessitas, to bear the weight of the state.
The message being, this is for Rome. This secures the dynasty. It's not about what Augustus wanted.
Exactly. Augustus was bending Roman tradition, manipulating the laws to try and force a kind of permanence that nature itself, through the deaths of his grandsons, had denied him.
But Tiberius alone wasn't enough, was he, given his unpopularity?
No. Augustus was far too politically savvy for that. He knew Tiberius, with his dour personality, couldn't stabilize the situation just by being named heir. He needed, well, an insurance policy.
A backup plan?
A backup plan, a buffer, and crucially, a clear next line of succession that would appease the nervous senators and, importantly, the legions.
And that insurance policy was Germanicus?
Germanicus, so Tiberius' nephew. And Germanicus was, in many ways, everything Tiberius was not. He was young, handsome, incredibly charismatic, genuinely popular with the troops. Everyone sort of saw him as destined for greatness.
So Augustus makes another demand?
Immediately. Right after adopting Tiberius, Augustus required Tiberius to turn around and adopt Germanicus as his son and heir.
Wow. That's complicated.
It creates this dizzying legal chain reaction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have the emperor, now around 7 years old, adopting his stepson, who's nearly 50, and that stepson is instantly forced to adopt his own popular nephew.
The entire future of the Roman world is suddenly resting on this fragile chain of adoptions.
Exactly. It's all built on legal actions designed purely to hold together a power structure that had been fundamentally broken by death.
It really highlights that paradox of human control, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Here's the most powerful empire on earth, supposedly built on discipline, on order, on permanence. And it has to resort to these complex, almost desperate legal maneuvers.
The foundation is legally sound, maybe, but personally and politically, it feels brittle.
Very brittle. It's based on mandated loyalty, on legal requirements, not on natural affection or clear bloodlines. It's a forced solution.
And that resonates, doesn't it? How often do we try to do something similar in our own lives? We try to control the narrative, control the future.
We really do. We create these intricate plans, financial strategies, health routines, career ladders, our own fragile agreements with what's coming next.
We build these systems hoping they'll guarantee security.
But ultimately, we're relying on things that are inherently limited. Our attempts to control everything are constantly trying to shore up a kind of power, a kind of foresight that really only God possesses.
And that feeling of not being able to guarantee the next step, secure our own little thrones, that's where so much anxiety comes from, that exhaustion.
Right. We put our hope in nailing down the external structure, only to find the foundations keep shifting underneath us. Just like Augustus found his world crumbling the moment Gaius died.
It points again to the need for a king whose authority isn't based on human adoption ceremonies, but on something eternal.
Precisely. Only that kind of king can offer genuine, lasting security.
Okay, so that's the crisis at the very top in Rome. But what about the rest of the empire? Did these tremors in the palace disrupt the day-to-day running of things?
That's a great question. And 84 actually gives us a really clear picture of the Pax Romana, Roman peace, in action, despite the drama in the capital. The outward machinery of the empire largely kept running.
This was the visible success story Augustus had built.
It was. You see, continued diplomacy, for instance, out in the east. Maintaining those treaties with Parthia was crucial. Rome's major rival, remember?
Right, keeping that border along the Euphrates River stable.
Exactly. And that stability allowed provinces like Syria and Asia Minor to remain relatively secure from invasion, which in turn fueled commerce.
So cities like Antioch could thrive.
Antioch, Ephesus,
Right.
its major hubs, they flourished as centers for trade, for cultural exchange. Goods flowed along those established routes, spices from India, silks maybe starting to trickle in from China, moving across these stable provinces towards the huge Roman market.
And in the West, the legions were busy.
The legions were constantly active, but generally successful in holding the frontiers. The Rhine, separating Roman Gaul from the Germanic tribes. The Danube, another critical boundary.
And that military presence allowed for Romanization, right? Spreading Roman culture.
Deeply. Veterans were granted land and settled in colonies across Gaul, across Spain. They brought with them Roman law, the Latin language, and crucially, that Roman infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, public buildings.
And none of this works without feeding Rome itself. The logistics must have been staggering.
Mind-boggling. The annona, the grain dole for the city of Rome, was a massive undertaking. Huge harvests from North Africa, especially Egypt. The breadbasket of the empire had to be constantly shipped across the Mediterranean. Specialized fleets, complex organization, just to feed the capital.
So if you were traveling through the empire in AD 4, you'd see these consistent signs of order everywhere.
You would. Solid stone milestones on the roads telling you the distance. Magnificent aqueducts marching across the landscape, bringing clean water into cities. Public forums, bathhouses, temples, all built seemingly to last forever. But the whole system projected this image of eternal managed order.
But that's the surface. You're saying we need to look beneath that marble facade.
We absolutely do. Because that visible piece, the Pax Romana, it came at a cost. And it was more fragile than it looked.
How so? What was the hidden cost?
Well, first, it wasn't a piece based on, say, universal justice or consent. It rested squarely on human rulers, ultimately, on Augustus and his chosen successors, and fundamentally on the force of Roman arms. The legions were the final guarantors.
And for ordinary people, especially on the provinces, Rome's presence wasn't always felt as beneficial.
Often, it was felt primarily as a heavy burden. They were the ones fueling this vast machine. Think about taxes. Farmers in Gaul, shepherds in Judea, they had to hand over significant portions of their produce, their livestock, their hard-earned currency.
Supporting the bureaucracy, the military.
The whole imperial structure.
Yeah.
And we can't forget the systemic inequality baked into the system. The prosperity enjoyed in Italy, the grandeur of Rome, was built quite literally on the backs of millions of enslaved people.
Working the large estates, domestic labor.
Absolutely essential forced labor that underpinned the economy. It was a brutal reality hidden beneath the veneer of peace and order.
And was the peace even truly total? Were there no challenges?
Oh, the peace was always precarious. While Augustus maintained overall stability, revolts were never completely extinguished. You get flare-ups, especially in remote mountain regions or along parts of that Danube frontier we mentioned.
And Rome's response would be swift and brutal.
Typically, yes. Quick, decisive military action to crush any dissent. The memory of past revolts, like a significant one in Gaul a few decades earlier, served as a constant warning. Stability was maintained as much by fear as by anything else.
It paints a picture, doesn't it? This vast, impressive system, but ultimately held together by force and resting on inequality and a certain level of fear.
It does. And again, there's a powerful parallel here to our own lives, our own identity struggles. We often find ourselves trying to maintain a kind of personal Pax Romana, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, we construct these complex external systems in our lives, our careers, our schedules, our social media image, all designed to create an outward appearance of order and control, hoping it will guarantee some kind of inner peace.
Trying to manage everything perfectly on the outside to feel okay on the inside?
Exactly. We strive to hide the internal instability, the exhaustion, the doubts behind this carefully managed facade.
But just like the Roman Empire, those personal systems, because they're built purely on our own effort and control, they're temporary, they're fragile.
They are. They're vulnerable to decay, to external pressures, to just the sheer unpredictability of life. Our attempts to secure inner peace solely through external control are ultimately bound to fail, just as the Roman system itself had its own deep vulnerabilities.
It reminds us again that the only truly reliable peace, the kind that transcends our circumstances, has to come from somewhere else, from the eternal King.
That's the core truth. His peace is unshakable because his kingdom is unshakable.
Okay, so let's shift our focus now, geographically and maybe spiritually too. Let's go east, to Judea. What's the situation there in 84?
Judea. It's a world away from the marble splendor of Rome, both literally and figuratively. In 84, this land is marked by, well, instability, political division, spiritual fracture.
This is the legacy of Herod the Great, isn't it? His kingdom being carved up after his death.
Precisely. His kingdom was divided among his 3 surviving sons, and it really embodied a house broken by the father's own ambition and, frankly, cruelty.
And the main source of trouble in 84 is Archelaus.
Archelaus. He received the core territories, Judea proper, Samaria, Idumea. Jerusalem was his administrative center. He held the title ethnarch, which was sort of ruler of the people, a step below king.
And his rule was problematic.
Problematic is putting it mildly. Archelaus seems to have combined staggering incompetence with outright cruelty. The people hadn't forgotten his debut, as it were.
What happened then?
Right after his father Herod died, there were some protests, some unrest in Jerusalem. Archelaus' response: he ordered his soldiers into the temple courts during Passover. A massacre ensued.
In the temple courts?
Yes. Thousands were reportedly killed in that sacred space. It was an atrocity that just burned itself into the collective memory of the Jewish people. An appalling act of violence and sacrilege.
And things didn't get better under his rule?
Not at all. His reign continued to be oppressive. By AD 4, the situation was so bad that a constant stream of complaints, petitions, delegations were making their way to Augustus in Rome.
What were they complaining about?
Crushing taxes, arbitrary judgments, general misrule. The people were desperate for relief. They were actually pleading with the distant emperor in Rome to step in and remove their own ruler.
That says a lot. How did his territory compare to his brother's?
Well, you had his half-brother, Herod Antipas. He ruled Galilee up north as tetrarch ruler of a quarter. Antipas managed a steadier rule, though certainly compromised by his deference to Rome.
Galilee was maybe less volatile than Judea under Archelaus.
Generally, yes. Life in the villages of Galilee, places like Nazareth, could maintain more of its ancient rhythm. Farming, fishing, community life, without that constant, immediate threat of Archelaus' brutality hanging over them.
And the third brother?
That was Philip. He governed the territories to the northeast, Iturea and Trachonitis, rugged areas. Philip seems to have been relatively competent, maintained order in his region, but none of them represented true, legitimate kingship in the eyes of the devout.
They were ultimately vassals of Rome, not the promised shepherd of Israel.
Exactly. They were part of the Roman system. And this whole political reality, the division, the cruelty of Archelaus, the compromised rule of Antipas, it had a deep impact on the spiritual atmosphere.
Even with the temple standing there in Jerusalem looking magnificent after Herod's rebuilding.
Especially then, perhaps. People could see the impressive stones, the gold, the grandeur, but they felt the profound lack of righteousness, the lack of justice in the human leadership governing the land, and, to some extent, the temple itself.
What do you mean, the temple leadership?
Well, the powerful priestly families, particularly the Sadducean elite, the wealthy aristocratic priests who control the temple operations, had largely become collaborators. Their focus was often on maintaining the temple status quo, its financial stability, even if that meant cooperating with corrupt Herodian rulers or the Roman governor.
So there was this disconnect between the outward religious practice and the longing for true holiness and justice.
A huge disconnect. And because of this perceived corruption, because of the foreign overlords, the prayers of the faithful became even more intense. They clung to the covenant promises in Scripture.
Praying for
the fulfillment of those promises, for a true son of David, a king anointed by God himself, who would finally shepherd Israel with righteousness, bring justice, bring deliverance from oppression. They longed for a stability that went far deeper than Roman treaties or Herodian politics.
that longing. It feels very real, very human.
It is. And it's a powerful connection point for us today, isn't it? When we look around at injustice in the world, or maybe more uncomfortably, when we're confronted with the moral failures and compromises in our own hearts, we feel that same deep need, that ache for a ruler who is perfectly just, perfectly loving, perfectly trustworthy.
So the situation in Judea in 84, fractured, oppressed, but desperately holding on to hope. It's like the stage is being perfectly set.
Perfectly set. The profound fragility and failure of the Herodian house just underscored the absolute urgent need for a different kind of kingdom altogether. An unshakable kingdom, ruled by a king whose legitimacy wasn't derived from Rome or from human maneuvering, but from God himself.
Which brings us finally to that quiet corner of Galilee.
Yes. While emperors in Rome are agonizing over succession, adopting heirs, while the people of Judea are petitioning Caesar about Archelaus, the truly world-changing story of 84 is unfolding almost invisibly.
Far from the centers of power, far from the record books.
Exactly. Away from the census takers, the legions, the temple tax collectors. In the small village of Nazareth, Jesus is 8 years old.
And these years, these so-called hidden years, they're actually crucial, aren't they? This is the unseen preparation.
Absolutely central to understanding God's quiet sovereignty, how he works in the fullness of time. Jesus' life at this age would have been marked by the simple, faithful rhythm of village life, completely removed from the political storms in Jerusalem or Rome.
Can we picture what that life might have looked like?
I think we can, with confidence. We imagine the dignity and simplicity of it. He would have spent his days observing his father, Joseph the Tecton.
The craftsman or builder.
Right. And in a village like Nazareth, he wasn't likely building palaces. He was probably shaping wood for homes, making yokes or plows, repairing tools, constructing doors. Basic, essential work for the community.
And Jesus would have watched him, learned from him.
Absorbed not just the skills, but the character reflected in the work, the patience required, the honesty in dealing with neighbors, the practical wisdom needed to shape raw materials into useful things.
Work tied to provision, to service.
And crucially, work joined to prayer. We can easily imagine the blessings before meals, the regular prayers, the whole rhythm of Jewish piety infusing Joseph's daily labor, mundane tasks transformed into acts of faithfulness.
And Mary's influence.
Mary's influence would have been the constant spiritual heartbeat of the home, instilling the core truths of the covenant through repetition, through ritual, through lived example. We know for certain he would have learned the Shema.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
That central confession and the command that flows from it, to love God with all your heart, soul, and strength, that would have been woven into the fabric of his upbringing.
And the Sabbath observance, too.
Oh, powerfully so. The lighting of the lamps on Friday evening, the blessing over the bread and wine, the radical commitment to rest, honoring God as creator. This weekly rhythm instilled reverence, discipline, but also warmth and celebration into his earliest formation.
And formal instruction would have started by this age.
Yes. In the local synagogue in Nazareth, likely a modest building, Jesus would have begun his more formal instruction in the Torah. He'd hear the scrolls being unrolled, listen to the readings, absorb the foundational stories.
Creation, the Exodus, the covenant at Sinai, the promises to King David.
All of it. He learned that the God who spoke to Abraham, the God who rescued Israel from Egypt, the God who promised David an everlasting throne, this was the same God he prayed to every day, his Father.
The Gospels summarize these years so briefly, don't they?
They do, but with profound weight. Luke tells us, the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was on him.
Let's unpack that a little. Grew and became strong.
Strength wasn't just physical, though helping Joseph would have built that. It was also strength of character, resilience built through daily chores, through the discipline of memorizing scripture, through faithfully living within the covenant community.
Filled with wisdom?
Wisdom gathered through observing life around him, seeing justice in Joseph's work, compassion in Mary's actions, understanding the patterns of planting and harvest, but supremely, wisdom from immersing himself in God's word.
And the grace of God was on him.
That divine favor, that unique relationship, this quiet growth, this simple life, was the visible unfolding of God's invisible perfect plan.
And the contrast with Rome in 84 is just staggering when you put it side by side.
It's an incredible divine irony, isn't it? Rome's a great hope, Gaius Caesar, the adopted heir, his life is extinguished out in the east. The imperial foundation trembles.
But in Galilee?
In Galilee, the eternal Son, the true heir of all creation, needs no Senate decree, no legal adoption ceremonies to confirm his status. His authority is inherent.
He's just quietly advancing, growing in strength, in wisdom.
Completely unthreatened by the human fragility that's causing such chaos elsewhere. While the world's attention is fixed on the Palatine Hill in Rome, wondering about the future of a temporary throne, heaven's gaze is fixed on a humble carpenter's home in Nazareth.
His identity was secure from the beginning.
Eternally secure. And that is how the fullness of time was truly unfolding, not through the spectacle and power plays of empire, but through the quiet, sovereign, perfect preparation of the king.
So as we bring things together for 84, we're left with this powerful paradox.
We really are. On one side, you see the undeniable fragility of human power systems. Augustus's dynasty, built for permanence, is shattered by death. Herod's dynasty in Judea is fractured and cruel. Human thrones are shown to be shaky.
But on the other side,
God's eternal plan is moving forward, completely unhindered. It's advancing quietly, irresistibly, in the person of this 8-year-old boy in Nazareth.
So the preparation for Christ's arrival, the fullness of time, it wasn't about grand political shifts necessarily.
Not primarily. It wasn't some loud announcement in the Roman Forum. It was the quiet, sovereign work of God, instilling strength, wisdom, and faithfulness in the one human life that would ultimately reveal God fully and establish a throne that mortality could never, ever touch.
And this pattern from history, it speaks so directly to our own lives, our own identity struggles today.
It really does. Because we're constantly tempted, aren't we, to build our own little kingdoms.
Kingdoms built on what? Our achievements, our
Oh,
control.
yeah. Built out of relentless striving for success, maybe built out of fear, trying to control our health, our finances, our relationships perfectly, built on the illusion that we are sovereign over our own lives.
Our own fragile personal thrones.
That's a good way to put it. And when those foundations inevitably crack, because they will, when a career path hits a dead end, when a relationship breaks down, when illness comes, when our own strength fails us, just like Augustus's carefully laid plans collapsed.
We realize just how fragile those self-made thrones really are.
Exactly. That pursuit of self-sovereignty, trying to be the king of our own lives, it just leads to burnout, anxiety, and ultimately disappointment. Because we're trying to manage something that was never ours to manage alone. It requires divine oversight, divine grace.
But the good news, the truth we see reflected in 84, is the truth for us right now, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Just as God's true King Jesus was present and secure and growing in Galilee while empires trembled, he is present with you right now, especially when your foundations feel like they're wavering.
His kingdom is not shaken by our circumstances. His reign doesn't depend on our success or failure.
Not at all. And that means your true identity, who you really are, isn't found in successfully maintaining those fragile little kingdoms. It's found only when you let go of those broken crowns. The crowns of self-reliance, performance, control, fear.
And exchange them for his eternal one.
Exactly. Receiving his kingship, his identity for you. And trust this, God is at work preparing your heart in this present moment, guiding you, shaping you with that same perfect sovereignty, just as surely as he prepared the entire world 2,000 years ago.
It's an invitation, then.
It truly is an invitation for you right now to step out of those exhausting temporary kingdoms you work so hard to maintain and step into his unshakable one.
To trust the one whose reign is certain, to find your security not in what you can build, but in being held by a king whose power never fails, whose love never ends, whose identity is rooted not in human law or adoption, but in eternity itself.
Maybe something to reflect on this week is this. If the most powerful human system the world had ever seen, Augustus's Rome, couldn't guarantee its own future, what fragile structures are you trying to build your security on today? What parts of your life have you not yet surrendered to the only one who truly holds tomorrow?
That is the heart of our true identity. We hope you'll join us again next week as we continue our journey together through In the Fullness of Time.